Most businesses want to be more environmentally friendly as their customers and employees are demanding it. In my job as a sustainability expert, I help them to find out about how to do this in regard to their products, their services, and everything around their business. Today I will give you a few examples of how I usually start this process and which steps I usually take to get them to the level that they want to be. And I will also tell you about things that worked very well and things that didn't. For example, related to this sheet of paper here. So if you want to get some insights into the topics and maybe also avoid the mistakes that I made on my way, then this video is for you. First, I will start to give you some background on the topic. So if you know very well what environmental sustainability stands for and what it all is about, then you can jump to the timestamp that I'm showing here. So what is environmental sustainability? Environmental sustainability ensures that we leave a healthy planet for the future generations to come, and that we consider the impact of our actions. The topics in this field range from the very obvious carbon emissions discussions to biodiversity or other emission discussions, as well as toxicity or anything that could harm the environment. Of course, as well, it also considers anything that can be done by a business to protect the environment or to restore it. And now, why is this so important? Well, from a global perspective, we want to protect our planet to make it livable in the future for ourselves, but also for the generations that follow us. And we also know quite well that we need to slow down climate change, because otherwise we will have more extreme weather events. We will also have regions which might not be inhabitable in the future anymore, and that will of course impact all of us, because people who live now in these regions will have to move, and this will somehow impact the whole world, of course. And from a company perspective, we can create a better brand image, and we can also address environmental conscious customers better. And we can also care for those employees who don't want to work for a company which is polluting the environment. And then there's some more practical advantages, and that could be cost savings, because if we don't need as much energy, we don't need to spend as much money. And there's also the legislatory changes that are coming up. So for many companies, there is no choice anymore. They need to adapt. But how do I actually make a business more eco-friendly? In the first step, I want to find out more about the company itself and all the issues that might come up and all the concerns that might show. And therefore, I usually like to ask a lot of internal experts to see all the risks that are associated with the environmental sustainability. So, for example, whether there are any toxic materials still in use, or whether there are other environmental issues coming up with topics. I also like to ask legal department whether there are any lawsuits regarding environmental sustainability, so that I get a better understanding of what is there. I like to have a deeper look at production, at research and development, and also at procurement processes. So these are usually the people that I involve. And also in the past, I sometimes asked into the whole company whether any one of the employees had some ideas where the company could become more environmentally friendly. And in one of the surveys, this little paper came up to me. But I will explain later how we continued with that. Step 2 then is desk research. I want to find out more about the products and services, and I do that in looking at competitors' reports or in industry reports, looking at what the customers are asking for, so basically doing some internet research to the topic. I also have a look about the product documentations that are available for my company and how much of the product portfolio is covered by these. And then I have a look at environmental lawsuits against competitors or customers and see whether we might have similar issues. For example, in the past I found one competitor had an ongoing lawsuit about water pollution for a product that was quite similar to ones that we also had. And that made me looking deeper into that product and looking deeper into whether we also have the same issue, but fortunately we didn't. So at the end of this step, I come up with a very long list of topics that are relevant and which should be further looked into. Then I summarize everything, and in the third step, I then recheck with internal experts again, or sometimes even with external experts if I have good connections outside. So what I do in this step is basically go back to them, showing them the long list of all the topics that I found on my way and checking with them how they would assess these risks or these possibilities. It doesn't need always to be risks, it can also be opportunities that I find on my way. So I check with the experts whether they see somehow a high risk, whether they see a high likelihood of something showing up, whether they see a big opportunity for the company, and that is where I somehow start to sort these. Step 4 then is the most difficult one. I need to find out which topics to focus first on. An example for high risk could be a product that is polluting the environment, or it could be some stigmatization of certain topics like we see, for example, at the moment for single-use plastic. I first combine all the individual assessments that I got from my step before from the internal experts and make a big picture out of it. And then I recheck with the management, because latest at this step I need to involve management, because most of the actions that we would do regarding the risks or opportunities around the topics need some funding and will also need some time resources. For the topics high on my list, I usually then start some calculations. For carbon emissions, this is usually quite straightforward. In the past, for example, we set some emission targets and therefore we calculated the initiatives with the highest carbon savings per dollar invested. You can also use internal carbon pricing if you have already established that. For other topics it's not as easy, so sometimes I needed to be very creative, and I thought of how important, for example, is a special topic for the customer and how much would we have to invest. So I was basically comparing the different investments with the potential outcome at the customer side. In any case, most of the time I found that concentrating on the most important products first saved a lot of time and effort and brought the biggest impact in the end. I'm looking at the top selling products or at the products that the company wants to push first. This little paper didn't have a big impact, it wasn't saving too much emissions, so I put it on the list, let it sit there and decided to maybe tackle it somewhere in the future. Step 5 is then to draft all the actions into the actual Gantt chart of actions. My roadmap that encompasses everything that happens in the field of sustainability for the whole company. And again, this little paper didn't even make it to the Gantt chart. And then I communicated the Gantt chart and all the actions that I planned to do back into the company. And the people who brought it up to me were not really happy that for this environmental topic that they saw as a substantial one, nothing would be happening. I learned from their reactions that I should have cared more. So in the end we came to the solution that some of the people who brought it up then wanted to volunteer to take up this topic and to change things. And they arranged with the IT to set the standard printing to two-side printing, and they also arranged with procurement to only procure recycling paper from then on. And everything was solved. So my biggest takeaway from this episode was really I need to listen better to the people, and calculations are not everything. For this topic of environmental sustainability, I used my standard approach. So if you want to know more about the standard approach and the single steps that I'm doing and how I would usually do that, I would suggest you watch this video where I explain it in detail.